My mom tore up my medical record and shouted, "Were you letting your sister die from this disease?" My dad called me a selfish mistake. My uncle added, "Some people just don't care about family." They dragged me to the hospital to force me to donate half of my liver against my will. My sister cried, "Please don't let me die because of your selfishness." Deep down, real family members make sacrifices. Then the doctor said 6 words that changed everything, and Mom collapsed in her chair. I never thought I would write this story, but after everything that happened, I need to tell it. My name is Brock, and this is about the day my family tried to force me to donate half of my liver to my sister Hallie, and how their plans backfired spectacularly. To understand this story, you need to know the dynamics of my family. I am 28 years old and the older of 2 daughters. My sister Hallie is 25 and has always been the golden child. While I was studious and independent, Hallie was charming and sociable. While I chose a practical career in accounting, Hallie became an Instagram influencer. My parents, Cheryl and Juan, have always supported her, and it has been painfully evident my whole life. Hallie was diagnosed with a rare liver disease called Wilson's disease when she was 23. It's a genetic condition where copper builds up in the organs, and if left untreated, it can be fatal. Wilson's disease is completely manageable with medication and dietary changes. Most people with this disease live normal lives, but Hallie has never been good at following medical advice. For the past 2 years, she has been inconsistent with her medication. She would skip doses when traveling to influencer events or stop taking it altogether because, according to her, it made her feel groggy and affected her content creation. She would go on crash diets that were terrible for her liver, drink alcohol despite explicit warnings, and generally ignore all the medical advice she received. Meanwhile, I have continued to live my life. I moved across the country for work, married my husband David, and we have been trying to start a family. We have been seeing a fertility specialist because we have had trouble conceiving, and after months of testing, we discovered that I have a condition called adenomyosis. It's similar to endometriosis, but the tissue grows inside the muscular wall of the uterus. It causes severe pain and heavy bleeding, and it was the reason we couldn't conceive. The only real treatment options were a hysterectomy, or trying a new radical procedure that could preserve my fertility, but was risky. We decided to have my eggs retrieved first and then try the fertility-preserving surgery, with hysterectomy and surrogacy as backup options. The egg retrieval was scheduled for the following month, and the surgery shortly after. I hadn't told my family anything about this. Given their history of making everything about Hallie, I wanted to manage my medical issues privately with my husband's support. Then Hallie's condition worsened. I received a frantic call from my mother on a Tuesday morning. "Brock, you have to come home immediately. Hallie has liver failure. She needs a transplant, and you are the only compatible family donor." I was shocked. "Mom, slow down. What happened? And how do you know I'm compatible? We had the whole family tested months ago when the doctors said this might happen. You're the only match. You need to come home and donate part of your liver to save your sister's life." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I had been tested without my knowledge. When was I tested? I never agreed to any of that. Remember when you came home for Christmas? We had Dr. Foster run some extra blood work along with your routine physical. I remembered. I had mentioned a meeting to update my physical for insurance, and my mom had arranged an appointment with our family doctor during my visit. I thought it was just routine blood work, but they must have sent samples for tissue typing and compatibility testing. "Mom, you can't run an organ compatibility test without consent. That's completely unethical. Don't be dramatic, Brock. The important thing is you can save Hallie's life. We need you to come home immediately to schedule the surgery." I took a deep breath. "Mom, I need time to think about this. We're talking about major surgery. I need to talk to David, talk to my doctors, and understand the risks." "There's no time to think," she shouted. "Your sister is dying. Every day we wait, her chances get worse." I tried to explain that I had my own medical situation, that I was scheduled for surgery, but she wouldn't listen. "I don't care about your little procedures, Brock. This is life or death. You're being incredibly selfish." We argued for another 20 minutes before I finally hung up, promising to call back when I had time to process everything. I immediately called Dr. Foster's office, furious about the unauthorized testing. His receptionist confirmed that blood had been sent for a family compatibility test, but claimed it was routine for family members. When I demanded to speak to Dr. Foster directly, I was told he no longer worked at the clinic and had moved to another state. I spent the next few days researching liver donation, talking to David, and trying to get more information about Hallie's actual condition. Living donor liver transplants are serious surgeries. The donor typically needs 3 to 4 months of recovery, and there are real risks like bleeding, infection, complications, and in rare cases, death. Given my medical situation and planned procedures, donating part of my liver would mean postponing my treatment indefinitely. The adenomyosis was getting worse, and my fertility window was already narrow. When I called my parents 3 days later to explain my decision to wait and tell them after my own medical procedures, I said, "I will help, but I need to have my own procedures first." "What? You're letting your sister die for an elective procedure?" my mom screamed. "Mom, it's not an elective procedure. I have a serious medical condition that requires treatment. Nothing you have is more serious than what Hallie is facing. She could die, Brock. Die. Do you understand?" My dad got on the phone. "Brock, I'm ashamed to call you my daughter right now. Hallie has always been there for the family, and when she needs you most, you abandon her." "Dad, I'm not abandoning anyone. I just need to take care of my own health first and then." "There is no then," he shouted. "It might be too late by then." The conversation ended with my dad calling me selfish and hanging up on me. Over the next week, I received a barrage of calls and messages from family members. My Uncle Mark called to tell me that some people just don't care about family. My Aunt Lisa sent long text messages about how real family members make sacrifices. The messages became increasingly manipulative. Lisa would send pictures of Hallie from when she was younger with captions like, "Remember when Hallie helped you with your college applications? She's always been there for you." Mom left voicemails describing Hallie's condition in graphic detail, trying to make me feel guilty for her suffering. My cousin Jennifer, Lisa's daughter, even got involved, sending me Instagram posts about organ donation with crying face emojis. The family had clearly coordinated their guilt campaign, taking turns to wear me down with different strategies. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Family group chats I had forgotten I was a part of suddenly became active with discussions about family loyalty and doing the right thing. Even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out to share their opinions on my duty as a sister. The psychological pressure was immense. Every notification made my stomach churn, wondering what new manipulative tactic they were using. Hallie called me, crying, begging me to reconsider. "Please don't let me die because of your selfishness, Brock. I'm scared and I need my big sister." It was heartbreaking, but I stood my ground. I explained to everyone who would listen that I wasn't refusing forever, just that I needed to address my own medical issues first. My adenomyosis surgery was scheduled for the following month, and after recovery we could reconsider the liver donation. But they wouldn't hear it. 2 weeks later, I got a call saying Hallie had taken a turn for the worse and was being hospitalized. My mother begged me to come home just to see Hallie, with no pressure about the surgery. Against my better judgment, I flew home. The moment I walked into my childhood home, I knew I had made a mistake. My parents, Uncle Mark, Aunt Lisa, and several family friends were there, and the atmosphere was tense. "We need to talk," my mom said, leading me into the living room where everyone was gathered. They had staged an intervention. One by one, they told me how disappointed they were in me, that Hallie had always been the good daughter, that I was being selfish and cold. My Uncle Mark was particularly harsh. "Some people just don't care about family," he said, staring at me. But I never thought my own niece would be one of them. I tried to explain my situation again, but no one would listen. I finally pulled out my medical records to show them the severity of my condition, and why I needed the procedures soon. My mother snatched them from me and in a moment I will never forget, ripped them up. "You're letting your sister die from this disease," she screamed, throwing the torn papers at me. I don't want to hear any more excuses. I was stunned. These were official medical documents, and she destroyed them as if they were nothing. "Mom, you just destroyed my medical records." "I don't care about your records. Hallie is dying." My father pointed at me in disgust. You're a selfish mistake, Brock. We should have stopped with Hallie. The room erupted in agreement. Lisa nodded vigorously. Real families make sacrifices. Hallie would do it for you in a heartbeat. I tried to leave, but they blocked the door. You're not going anywhere until you agree to help your sister, said my Uncle Mark. That's when they revealed their real plan. They had already contacted Hallie's medical team and scheduled an evaluation for a potential surgery. They had appointments set up and expected me to agree. We're all going to the hospital right now, my mom announced. You're going to do the right thing and save your sister's life. I refused, but they dragged me to the car. My Uncle Mark grabbed one arm, my dad the other, and they forced me into the back seat between my mom and Aunt Lisa so I couldn't escape. The ride to the hospital was a nightmare. They continued to emotionally manipulate me the entire way, while Hallie sent me texts from her bed. Please don't let me die because of your selfishness, her text read. I'm scared and I need you. When we got to the hospital, they took me straight to Hallie's room. She was in bed, pale and weak, surrounded by my family. As soon as she saw me, she started to cry. Brock, thank God you're here. Please, I'm so scared. The doctors say I don't have much time left. The whole family was there, nodding and approving of everything Hallie said. Lisa put her hand on her shoulder. Real family members make sacrifices, she said, looking at me pointedly. Hallie has always been so generous. Now it's your turn. They had orchestrated this entire scene to manipulate me into agreeing to the surgery right then and there. Hallie's doctor, Dr. Rodriguez, was waiting for me in the hallway with consent forms. Miss Brock, he said, approaching me. Your family has explained the situation. We can begin the evaluation process immediately if you're ready to proceed. I felt trapped. Everyone was staring at me expectantly. Hallie was crying, and the weight of their manipulation was overwhelming. I need to see Hallie's medical records first, I said. I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with, dear. Rodriguez nodded and handed me a tablet with Hallie's chart. As I reviewed it, I started to notice things that didn't add up. Hallie's liver function tests were bad, but not indicative of end-stage liver failure. Her copper levels were elevated, but not as severely as they should be for someone with liver failure from Wilson's disease. And most importantly, there were notes about non-compliance with her prescribed medication and continued alcohol use against medical advice. Dr. Rodriguez, I said, looking up from the tablet, these numbers don't look like someone with end-stage liver failure. They look unwell. Well, liver disease can be complex. But according to this, Hallie has been non-compliant with her medication for months and has continued to drink alcohol. Wouldn't her condition significantly improve if she just took her medication and stopped drinking? The room went silent. Dr. Rodriguez looked nervously at my family. Miss Brock, while compliance is important, we believe a transplant is the best course of action at this time. I kept reading. Something else caught my eye. It says Hallie was evaluated for the transplant list but was denied placement. Why? Dr. Rodriguez looked even more uncomfortable. There were concerns about her ability to maintain the post-transplant regimen. What kind of concerns? He sighed. Patients who are non-compliant with their pre-transplant care are often considered high risk for post-transplant complications. The transplant committee felt that Hallie needed to demonstrate greater compliance before being listed. I felt like I had been hit by a truck. So, Hallie can't get on the official transplant list because she won't take her medication or stop drinking, but you want me to donate part of my liver to her. My family started talking at once, trying to explain, but I held up my hand. Dr. Rodriguez, if Hallie started taking her medication regularly and stopped drinking, what would her prognosis be? He was quiet for a long moment. Wilson's disease is manageable with proper treatment. Many patients live normal lives with medication compliance and lifestyle changes. And if she received a liver transplant but continued to be non-compliant with her medication, the transplant would likely fail within a few years. The room was completely silent. I looked at my family, who were all avoiding eye contact. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. Hallie has a manageable condition that she is choosing not to treat properly. She can't get on the official transplant list because of her non-compliance, but you all want me to undergo major surgery to give her part of my liver, knowing that if she doesn't change her behavior, the transplant will fail anyway. My mom tried to interrupt. Brock, it's not that simple. Actually, it is that simple, I said, standing up. You've all been lying to me. Hallie isn't dying from an inevitable progression of her disease. She's making herself sick by not following medical advice. Hallie started crying harder. Brock, please, I promise I'll be better about my medication. You've been promising that for 3 years, Hallie, and you've had every opportunity to get better, but you've chosen not to. My dad stepped forward, furious. Don't you dare blame Hallie for being sick. I'm not blaming her for being sick, I said firmly. I'm pointing out that she is choosing not to treat her illness properly, and you all want me to risk my life and my future to enable that decision. That's when Rodriguez said the 6 words that changed everything. Actually, there's something else you should know. Everyone turned to look at him. He seemed deeply uncomfortable but continued. Hallie's blood work from last week shows significant improvement. In fact, her liver function has improved since she's been hospitalized, and we've been monitoring her medication compliance. The room went silent. What do you mean? My mom asked weakly. I mean that with proper medication adherence and no alcohol, Hallie's liver function is improving. She may not need a transplant at all if she continues with proper treatment. My mother collapsed into her chair, her face pale. But you said she was dying, she whispered. Dear. Rodriguez looked at all the shocked faces. I said that without intervention, her condition could be fatal. The intervention we recommended was medication compliance and lifestyle changes, not necessarily a transplant. The family was insistent on pursuing the transplant option. I turned to my family, incredulous. You knew, didn't you? My mom couldn't meet my eyes. We thought the transplant would be a guarantee. With the medication, there's always a risk she'll go off it again. So you decided to manipulate me into major surgery as a backup plan for Hallie's non-compliance. The silence in the room was deafening. Uncle Mark tried to save the situation. Brock, even if she doesn't need it right now, a transplant would give Hallie security. Are you insane? I exploded. You want me to donate part of my liver as an insurance policy? Do you have any idea what you've put me through? What you've cost me? I thought about my own surgery, which I had already had to postpone because of this drama. I thought about the fertility treatments David and I had put on hold. I thought about the torn-up medical records and the emotional manipulation. I'm done, I said. I'm done with all of you. I started to walk toward the door, but Hallie cried out, Brock, wait. I'm sorry. I didn't know they were lying to you too. I turned around. What do you mean? Hallie looked at our parents, tears in her eyes. They told me you had already agreed to the surgery. They said you wanted to do it but were scared of the procedure. They told me you needed to be convinced because you were too anxious to make the decision yourself. I felt sick. They had manipulated Hallie too, making her believe I was willing but just needed encouragement. They told me that if I didn't seem sick enough, you might change your mind, Hallie continued. So I stopped taking my medication for a few weeks to make sure my blood work came back bad enough. My mother gasped. Hallie, you didn't tell me that. Hallie shot back. You said Brock needed to see how serious it was. The full extent of their manipulation was becoming clear. They had convinced Hallie to make herself sicker to manipulate me into surgery. Dear. Rodriguez looked horrified. Mrs. Patterson, did you encourage your daughter to be non-compliant with her medication? My mother started backpedaling frantically, but the damage was done. I looked at my family, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, and realized they had been willing to risk both Hallie's health and mine for their own peace of mind. I'm leaving, I said. And I don't want any of you to ever contact me again. Brock, please, my dad started. No. You called me a selfish mistake. You destroyed my medical records. You manipulated both me and Hallie, endangering her health. You tried to coerce me into surgery without my consent. It's over. I walked out of the hospital room without looking back, but the drama wasn't over. As I walked down the hall, I heard footsteps behind me. It was my Uncle Mark trying to catch up. Brock, wait. Hallie is still sick, even if she's getting better. Don't you think you owe her at least some consideration? I spun around so fast he almost ran into me. I don't owe anyone anything, Uncle Mark. Especially not people who lied to me and tried to manipulate me into surgery. We weren't lying, we were just… What? Trying to trick me into organ donation? Do you hear yourself right now? Other people in the hallway were starting to stare. Uncle Mark looked embarrassed but pressed on. Your parents are devastated. They're just trying to help Hallie. By destroying my medical records, testing me without my consent, literally dragging me here against my will? My voice was getting louder. That's not help, that's abuse. You're being dramatic. I pulled out my phone. Good thing I've been recording this conversation, just like I recorded the one in Hallie's room. Do you want me to play back the part where you all admit to manipulating Hallie into stopping her medication to look sicker? Uncle Mark went pale. You recorded us? I started recording the second you all started your intervention at the house. I have everything, the threats, the physical coercion, my mom destroying my medical records, all of it. He took a step back. Brock, you can't. That was a private family matter. Private family business? I laughed bitterly. You mean attempted coercion and medical fraud? Because that's what this is, Uncle Mark. What you all did today is illegal. I could see the fear in his eyes as the reality of the situation sunk in. Now if you'll excuse me, I have some calls to make. I left him standing there in the hallway and went straight to the hospital administration. The administrator on duty, Mrs. Nash, listened to my story with growing alarm. When I played her the recordings on my phone, her expression turned grim. Mrs. Patterson, what you're describing is extremely serious. We need to involve our ethics committee immediately. I want a full investigation, I said. Not just into Dr. Rodriguez's conduct, but into how my family managed to have me tested without my knowledge and how they were allowed to bring me here under false pretenses. Mrs. Nash nodded. We will need copies of those recordings for our investigation. And I want you to know we take patient autonomy very seriously here. What happened to you should never have occurred. While I was dealing with hospital administration, chaos was erupting in Hallie's room. According to what Hallie told me later, my parents had a complete meltdown after I left. My mother started hyperventilating, convinced Hallie was going to die because of my selfishness. My father was pacing the room, talking about how they had raised an ungrateful daughter. Aunt Lisa was crying, saying she couldn't believe I would abandon the family like that. But Hallie, for the first time in years, stood up to them. Enough! She shouted, silencing everyone. Enough of this. Brock is right and you all know it. Hallie, honey, you're just upset. My mom started. I'm not upset, I'm disgusted, Hallie retorted. Do you realize what you made me do? You convinced me to stop taking my medication to look sicker. That could have killed me. We were just trying to help. You were trying to control everyone. Hallie was crying, but her voice was strong. Brock has her own medical issues to deal with, and instead of supporting her, you manipulated us both. My dad tried to interrupt, but Hallie wasn't done. And you, she pointed at him. You called Brock a selfish mistake. She is your daughter. She has always been there for this family, and when she needs to prioritize herself, you call her a mistake. The room went silent. Hallie looked at all of them in disgust. Get out, she said quietly. Hallie, get out, she screamed. All of you. I'm done with this manipulation. I'm done with the trauma. Brock was right to leave. And if you can't see how wrong you were, then I don't want you here either. Hospital staff had to intervene when my parents refused to leave voluntarily. They were escorted out of the hospital after causing a disturbance. Lisa left on her own, muttering about how both of her nieces had turned out to be ungrateful. Meanwhile, I was in the parking lot on the phone with David, telling him everything that had happened. Oh my God, Brock, he said when I finished. Are you okay? Do you need me to fly out? I'm okay, I said, though I wasn't sure if it was true. But I think I need to come home. I can't stay here anymore. Of course. I'll book you a flight right now. And Brock, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. What they did was inexcusable. While I was waiting for my taxi to the airport, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Hallie. Brock, please don't hang up. I'm listening. I kicked them all out. Mom, Dad, Uncle Mark, all of them. I told them what they did was wrong, and that I don't want to see them until they apologize to you. I was surprised. Hallie, you don't have to take sides. This isn't about sides, she interrupted. It's about right and wrong. They were wrong, and I was wrong for going along with it, even if I didn't understand what was really happening. Hallie, no, let me finish. I looked at my medical records after you left. My liver function has been improving for weeks. I've been feeling better. I have more energy and my lab work is getting better. The doctors have been telling me this, but Mom and Dad kept insisting I was still in danger. She paused and I could hear her crying. They made me believe I was dying so that I would help them manipulate you. And I was so scared that I went along with it. I stopped taking my medication like they suggested, which just made me feel worse. It made me more scared and more willing to do whatever they told me. That's classic manipulation, Hallie. They used your fear against both of us. I know that now. And I know I have a lot of work to do to get better, not just physically but mentally. I've been dependent on their chaos and drama for so long. I don't even know who I am without it. That's a good realization to have, Brock. I know I don't deserve it, but do you think maybe someday we could have a relationship? Just us without them getting in the way. I thought about it for a moment. I think that's possible, Hallie. But it's going to take time, and it's going to require you to stay in therapy and take care of yourself. I will. I promise you. Don't promise me, Hallie. Promise yourself. The next few months were a whirlwind. The hospital's ethics investigation concluded that Dr. Rodriguez had violated several protocols and professional standards. He faced a formal review by the medical board, which would take several months to complete. The investigation also revealed that Dr. Foster, the family doctor who ran the unauthorized tests, had a history of similar ethical complaints. My parents had specifically sought him out because other doctors had refused to run compatibility tests without proper consent and counseling protocols. I consulted with a lawyer specializing in medical malpractice about the unauthorized testing and the attempted coercion. The lawyer, Pat Williams, was appalled by what had happened. Brock, what your family did constitutes medical fraud and possibly assault, she told me during our consultation. The unauthorized testing alone is a serious violation of your rights. What are my options? You could press criminal charges, file a civil lawsuit, or both. You have clear evidence of coercion and fraud. Those recordings you made are damning. I thought about it for several days. Part of me wanted to pursue every legal avenue possible to make them pay for what they had done, but another part of me just wanted to be done with them. I want to send them a cease and desist letter. I finally decided. Something that makes it clear their behavior was illegal, and that they need to stay away from me. But I don't want to drag this out in court for years. Pat nodded. That's reasonable. Sometimes the threat of legal action is enough to make people reconsider their behavior. The letter she sent to my family was brutal and comprehensive. It detailed every law they had possibly broken, every ethical violation they had committed, and made it crystal clear that any further contact with me would result in immediate legal action. The letter was also addressed to Uncle Mark and Aunt Lisa, as they had participated in the physical coercion and manipulation. The response was swift and predictable. My parents hired their own lawyer, who tried to argue that everything they had done was motivated by love and concern for Hallie's well-being. Pat's response was concise. Intent does not invalidate illegality. Their actions constitute fraud, coercion, and assault, regardless of their purported motivations. Meanwhile, Hallie was making significant progress. She found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and manipulation, and learned how to identify and resist the patterns that had controlled her life for so long. She called me frequently to update me on her progress, always respecting my boundaries and never pushing for more contact than I was comfortable with. I'm starting to understand how unhealthy our family dynamic was, she told me during one of our calls. My therapist says Mom and Dad created a system where crisis and drama were the only ways to get attention. That makes sense, I said. I always felt like I had to be perfect and invisible, while you had to be the center of attention and constantly in need of help. Exactly. And neither of us learned how to just be normal people with normal problems. Everything had to be a life or death emergency. Hallie also shared that our parents had been calling her constantly, trying to get her to convince me to come back to the family. They keep saying you're being unreasonable and that families are supposed to forgive each other, she told me. What do you tell them? I tell them that forgiveness requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing and genuine change, not just the passage of time. They haven't acknowledged that what they did was wrong, so there's nothing to forgive yet. I was impressed by Hallie's growth. The sister I grew up with would never have been able to articulate something like that, let alone stand up to our parents. The fallout was swift and brutal. I went straight to the hospital administration and reported what happened. Dear Rodriguez faced an ethics investigation for his role in the manipulation, and the hospital had to overhaul its procedures. I consulted with a lawyer about the unauthorized testing and the attempt to coerce me into surgery. While we ultimately decided not to pursue legal action, the lawyer's letter to my family made it clear that their behavior had seriously crossed legal and ethical lines. I also contacted Hallie's hospital social worker to inform her that my parents had encouraged Hallie to be non-compliant with her medication. This triggered a psychiatric evaluation and intervention that Hallie desperately needed. But the most satisfying revenge came naturally, without any effort on my part. Hallie, finally getting proper psychiatric care and support, realized how toxic our family dynamic had become. She started taking her medication regularly, stopped drinking, and began therapy to address the underlying issues that had led to her noncompliance. Within 3 months, Hallie's liver function had improved dramatically. She didn't need a transplant at all. Meanwhile, my parents had to face the consequences of their actions. The extended family found out the truth about what happened, and most of them were horrified. Uncle Mark and Aunt Lisa, who had been so vocal about family loyalty, were outraged to discover they had been manipulated into participating in an elaborate lie. My parents lost the support of most of the family and faced serious questions about their judgment and ethics. Several relatives cut off contact with them completely. Hallie called me 6 months later to apologize. She had been in therapy and finally understood how she had been manipulated and how she had participated in my manipulation. We had a long, difficult conversation, but we were able to start rebuilding our relationship one small step at a time. "I'm so sorry, Brock," she said, crying on the phone. "I was so scared, and they made me believe you were the only thing standing between me and death. I didn't understand they were lying about everything." "I know," I said. "They manipulated both of us. Can you ever forgive me?" It took time, but I did forgive Hallie. She was a victim in this situation too, even if her choices contributed to the problem. My parents, however, I never forgave. They tried to contact me several times, sending letters, having other relatives call, even showing up at my work once. But I held my ground. They had shown me exactly who they were and what I meant to them, and I believed them. The final twist came a year later. David and I successfully completed my surgery and began fertility treatments. We were cautiously optimistic about our chances of having a baby. Hallie called to tell me she was engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Michael, and they were planning a small wedding. She wanted me to be her maid of honor. "I know it's a lot to ask," she said, "but you're the only family I have left that I trust. Mom and Dad have burned their bridges with everyone." I was surprised but touched. "What about them? Are they invited to the wedding?" "No," Hallie said firmly. "I can't have people at my wedding who just ruined our lives with their manipulation. Michael helped me understand that what they were doing wasn't love, it was control." I agreed to be her maid of honor, and the wedding was beautiful, small, intimate, and filled with people who genuinely cared about Hallie and Michael. My parents were not there, and for the first time in my life, a family event was about the people it was supposed to be about, not about managing the emotions and expectations of my parents. During her speech at the reception, Hallie thanked me for showing her what a real family looks like: people who love you enough to tell you the truth, even when it's hard. Today, Hallie and I have a good relationship. She's been in perfect health for over 2 years, takes her medication religiously, and has built a life for herself free of crisis and drama. David and I welcomed our baby daughter 6 months ago, after a successful round of fertility treatments. Hallie is a doting aunt who sends gifts and visits regularly. My parents have never met their granddaughter, and they never will. They made their choices and I made mine. Unfortunately, I heard they tell people that both of their daughters abandoned them for no reason. But the family members who know the truth have made it clear that my parents are the architects of their own isolation. People sometimes ask if I regret not having a relationship with my parents, especially now that I have a child of my own. The answer is no. They taught me exactly what kind of parent I don't want to be. They showed me that love without respect is not love at all. It's control. Hallie and I learned that we didn't owe anyone access to our bodies, our health, or our lives, just because we shared DNA with them. Real family, the kind worth having, doesn't manipulate, lie, or coerce to get what they want. The 6 words that changed everything weren't just about Hallie's improvement. They were about the truth finally coming out and both of us finally seeing our parents for who they really were. It took a crisis to reveal it, but in the end, Hallie and I got something we had never had before. A healthy family relationship built on honesty, respect, and a genuine concern for each other's well-being. And my parents got exactly what they deserve, each other, and the consequences of their choices. Some might think that's harsh, but I sleep soundly knowing my daughter will grow up in a home where love doesn't involve manipulation, where family means support instead of coercion, and where no one will ever try to force her to sacrifice her body or her future for someone else's peace of mind. That's the best revenge of all, breaking this cycle and building something better.